Thank you very much. Yeah, no problem. Be in touch.
Thank you. Thank you.
Have a good one. I knew it.
Yeah, if you want to keep eating, feel free to come up and keep eating. There's plenty of food left. We're not waiting on anyone. No one else was supposed to be here this late.
Football players, I thought were still coming.
Oh no, they've been done with practice since 5, so they should be here. Not sure where they are. Yeah, help yourself. Just watch out for the cord on your way out. But while you're eating, please give us your attention. We have a very unique and awesome opportunity tonight. Some of you may know Angelo from the Weston Racquet Club. And Angelo is here tonight to share a pretty interesting and cool story. I'm going to try to do his bio justice, but it really is an unbelievable bio. He currently serves as director of tennis at the Weston Racquet Club. He is a USPTA P1 Elite and PTR teaching professional, being certified back in 1992. We won't discuss that. Angelo played varsity tennis at Hamden High School en route to becoming a top Division I player at UConn, where he earned a BS degree in sports marketing. He won the USTA New England Sportsmanship Award in 2005. In 2007, he and his identical twin brother, Ettore, were ranked #1 in New England men's open doubles and top 10 in singles. Angelo is a two-time Guinness World Records of 2 different tennis titles, the longest tennis rally and the longest tennis volley rally. And he can explain the difference to you. Angelo earned the 2007 USPTA Regional Teaching Pro of the Year and 2007 Open Player of the Year. He earned the National 2009 USPTA Tennis Industry Excellence Award, also for New England in 2008. He's coached ladies teams and played on a 5.0 and Open USTA men's teams that have gone to nationals. His most recent certifications are developing mental toughness and USTA high performance. There's a lot more on here, but I think I'm going to let Angelo get started because it's more interesting coming from him than it is from me. So Angelo, they're all yours.
So first of all, thanks for having me here, and Mark, really it's my pleasure. I started working at Weston Racquet Club as its director of tennis about 6 years ago. And my first phone call and visit was to Mark. And I said, I've coached girls' high school tennis teams before. I've got them to states and that sort of thing. And I would love to, in addition to being the director of tennis at Weston, I would love to coach the girls' team. And I remember, waiting for Mark outside his office. I took a stroll down the hallway, and I saw all of the success that your teams have had, and I was in awe. I said, "This is amazing. Weston High School has something really special with athletics, and I wonder what that is." And so, in any event, becoming the girls' high school coach couldn't happen because I realized after probably the first week on the job as director of tennis that it was impossible for me to do both well. I could probably do both, but I couldn't do both well. So then I said, well, if I can't directly influence the outcome of wins or losses with the girls' tennis team, maybe I can coach to the best of my ability any of the players that come to our club. So indirectly, that's what I've been doing. So I want to share with you my story. I hope it inspires you. And then at the end, open it up for Q&A. But if there's clarification questions along the way, then feel free to ask. But I definitely want to ask and eager to answer your questions at the end, because this is about you, not about me. So firstly, Coach John Wooden, one of the best coaches of all time, he coached successfully UCLA basketball team to many championships. And if you read his story, one of the things that didn't sit well with him was that all the school was about was just winning, and that if you were at UCLA and you were coaching basketball and you had an undefeated season, that the coach would be considered mediocre. That what was more important was that not only did the team have an undefeated season, but that the scoring margin was big. That they not only want to win every game, but they want to win every game with a big margin. Now, whether or not, people had money riding on that, I don't know. So he thought about redefining the word success. And success isn't just about winning. So he came up with this phrase. Success is the peace of mind which is a direct result of self-satisfaction in knowing you did your best to become the best you are capable of becoming. And I believe that. I believe that winning is a byproduct of doing the right thing consistently, day in, day out. So, a little bit about my background. I never took a tennis lesson in my life, and I started tennis late. I started tennis when I was about 16 years old. So most of the people that I coach at my club have a big advantage over me because they started tennis way before I did. However, I did start table tennis when I was 3. And my grandfather, he was a farmer and a carpenter, and he built a table tennis table in his basement. And so my identical twin brother, Ettore, and I, we have a small Italian family. It's just the two of us, and we would go over our grandfather's house every Sunday to have pasta, and we couldn't wait to finish eating because we'd run down to the basement and look forward to competing in table tennis. So unfortunately, the table was too high, so what he did was he cut the legs out from under the table, stood us on milk crates, and we started playing when we were 3. And I remember us playing hundreds of games each week and each year as we grew up, and I really looked forward to it. And it got pretty competitive. I remember my uncle, Augustine, he was an accomplished table tennis player, and after a while, I didn't really know that I was starting to beat him. And how I knew this was because it was Sunday and we had gone to church, he would be pretty much in a suit and dress shoes, but he would be diving on the concrete floor to get some of my shots. So I think I was age 4 when I started to beat him. But in any event, maybe it was a little bit older. But every week we'd play table tennis for many years. So then I had a really good childhood friend. His name was Rob Oppenheim. And he was the top-ranked tennis player in the state in every age division. And I was a fan of tennis. I watched tennis on TV with my parents. My parents used to watch Wimbledon with McEnroe compete against Bjorn Borg, who was a really good sport. So sportsmanship was ingrained in me before winning. Although I will say I was really competitive. And I remember when I was in kindergarten one Easter Sunday, what my kindergarten teacher did was, for the Easter egg hunt, instead of putting Easter eggs out, he wrapped a group of 10 pennies in silver foil and hid them around the school property. And then he let everyone out to run and get those pennies. And I remember I basically ran really fast. That was my strategy, was go as fast as I could. And I pretty much collected all of the pennies. And I remember a life lesson there with my grandfather, who was there. And the teacher came over and said, "Angelo, you have to share your pennies with all of the students." And I was devastated. I was crying. And I remember they let me keep one roll, and my grandfather gave me my very first silver dollar. So I never forget that moment, because that was showing me that he was rewarding my sportsmanship above all else. So fast forward now a few years, and my brother and I would go watch my friend Rob compete in tennis tournaments around New England and New York, and he would pretty much win all the tournaments that he competed in. It was really exciting. I never thought that I would be good enough to actually play. I was a fan. So then come my sophomore year in high school, my friend Rob said to my brother and I, "Why don't you guys try out for the high school tennis team?" I said, I'm not anywhere near as good as you. He's taken lessons since he was been really young and everything. And so he said, "No, you're athletic. You can run down the ball. You should try." So my brother and I committed to try out for the tennis team. So we pretty much practiced every day from that moment until tryouts the next year, my junior year. And there was an article in the New Haven Register. There was a picture in February one year. There was snow on the ground, and we had shoveled off the tennis court, and we were playing tennis, practicing for the team on that one shoveled off court. So I definitely had a desire to make the team. So lo and behold, I enter my first tournament before tryouts to see what I can do. So it was the Hamden Town tournament. And I will say it was a pretty awkward moment for me, because the only thing that I was wearing that was tennis related was my sneakers, my tennis shoes. I was wearing shorts without pockets, more like runner shorts. The only collared shirt I had was something that I wore to church. And in tennis, typically back then, you had to wear something with a collar. And my socks were like basketball socks rolled way up with the lines. So I definitely looked like a geek and nothing like a tennis athlete. But somehow I battle through each of the rounds and I get to the finals. Go figure. So I end up playing against this guy, Matt. And Matt had grew up all his life playing tennis. He had membership at the tennis local country club on clay courts. He had played on all different types of surfaces. And the racket that I had was a $30 racket from Caldor. So it's kind of like the Sports Authority, way before the Sports Authority, before the Sports Authority. In any event, so he said, rather than playing on public courts because they're not as even as I like them to be, why don't you come to my country club and play the finals at my country club? So I was like, okay, not realizing I was giving up home field advantage. But go to his country club. He beats me the first set, something like 6-2 or 6-3. And for those of you that play tennis, that's kind of like a lopsided first set. You play the best of 3 sets. But the second set, my thing was, okay, I realize he's definitely much better than me, but I want this more than he does. So I'm going to run down every ball, I don't care how long it takes, until I win. So that's what I did. Side to side, I ran down every single ball. I end up somehow scrapping out the second set 7-6, which is a tiebreak. And he was so devastated that someone like me, who shouldn't even be on the same court as him, took a set off of him. And he was so upset that I ended up beating him in the third set 6-0. So my parents said, Angelo, you're onto something. I mean, this is kind of cool. You played your first tournament, and we've never really paid for lessons or anything, and you won. So here comes high school tryouts. We do the tryouts. I think I hit pretty well, and I make the team. And I end up playing number 3 singles. So that was pretty good. So for those of you tennis players, you know that you play singles, and then you play doubles, but you can't repeat. You can't play both. But in college, you repeat. So that was exciting for me, being a walk-on junior. Nobody who knew who I was, and I had just started playing tennis. But I really liked competing. And I will say that for me, competing was about mental toughness. I felt that I could control the outcome of the match if I really had a good strategy and gave it 100% effort. And so that's what I did. My technique wasn't that good. But I had a pretty good two-handed backhand. My backhand then was better than my forehand, and your coaches tell you in high school, hit to the person's backhand is probably going to be the weaker shot. So everybody hit to my backhand, and they didn't know that was my stronger shot. So that's why I did pretty well. So my brother and I ended up going to the state tournament. We played singles and doubles in the state tournament. And again, that was really exciting for me. And then going into my senior year, I ended up, I think, only losing 2 matches. One was to Staples. They were a very, very good team. And the other was to Amity. And Amity's #1 player back then, Lou Gloria, has since gone on to the tour and played top 150. And he and my good friend Rob would have these battles when they played each other. #1 versus from Hamden versus Amity. It was really a treat to watch. So then comes the University of Connecticut. So my parents really focused on education first. So I studied a lot, I will say, in high school. Because I had a twin brother, I felt like I didn't need a lot of friends. I had him, and he was my best friend. So I wasn't, this mega social person. So I pretty much studied and played tennis. So, I did well in high school, got good grades, and UConn at the time was my safety school. So I think I applied to Yale, Brown, Cornell, and then I was like, oh, let me throw in UConn just in case I don't get into those. And I didn't, I just got into UConn. So I said, well, let me make the most of it. So let me challenge myself, take honors everything. So I took all honors classes at UConn. It's an engineering school. I was told it was a really good engineering school. And my high school advisor, my counselor said, well, you have really good grades in math and in science. So math plus science, that's engineering. So, okay. So I did engineering. And unfortunately, my chemistry labs were in the afternoons at 3 o'clock. And that's when tennis tryouts were in tennis practice. So unfortunately, my first 2 years, I couldn't play for the tennis team. Then going into my junior year, I sat down with my good friend Rob again at his house, and we were talking, and I was flipping the pages of a tennis magazine, and he said, what do you want to do when you graduate? And I said, well, I don't really want to be designing bridges or anything. And he said, well, that's what engineering is. I mean, when you get out, that's what you're going to be doing. I said, I'm more of a people person, like advertising, marketing. And I was flipping through, and I saw a Nike ad, and I said, this designing ads like this would be really cool. So he said, well, why don't you do that? So the very next day, I canceled all my classes, and I switched my major to sports marketing. And it was basically a concentration in sports marketing. Sports science was the actual degree. But then what happened was, as a byproduct of that decision, I could play on the tennis team now because I didn't have chemistry labs in the afternoon at 3 o'clock. So I said, that's really cool, but I haven't really played for the last 2 years. I mean, I played a little bit. I played intramurals at UConn because that was the next best thing, and I won singles and doubles my first 2 years. I played table tennis there, and I won that as well. Anything to do with a racket, I pretty much did. So I asked another good friend, Jerome, who lived across from me at Wade in Towers, and I said, if you think you had the ability, if you thought you had the ability to make a college varsity sports team, and you were now a junior, would you still try out? And he said, yes, definitely. And it reminded me of trying out for my high school team when I was a junior. So here I was. I walk on the first day of tryouts. My tennis clothes were a little bit better then, and my racket was a $100 Prince racket, so I upgraded everything. But, you know, they didn't know who I was. I was not recruited. There were other athletes on the team that had received money and scholarships and that sort of thing, and they didn't know who I was. So in tryouts, they would just stick me against anybody. And so the first day, I won all my matches. So they said, well, Angelo, you can come back tomorrow. And the next day, I won all my matches. You can come back tomorrow. And then that day, some people who didn't know when tryouts started just walked on like a Wednesday and said, you know, I'm here to try out for the tennis team. Tryouts are 2 days ago, but you know what? Play this guy Angelo. And if you beat him, then you can keep trying out. So I was like the benchmark for the team. And so I ended up beating those players. So I get to the very last day, and I'm playing this guy, really good serve and volley player, really obliterating the ball, and I ended up winning 6-3. And so then the assistant coach, Mike Greenberg, comes up to me and says, okay, you know, come back on next Monday. And so he walks away, and as he's walking away, I go, so what do you mean? What do you mean come back next Monday? He's like, come back next Monday. He's like, does that mean I made the team? He's like, yeah, come back next Monday. You're on the team. So I said, that is amazing. I cannot believe I just made a D1 team as a walk-on, as a junior, not recruited or anything. This is incredible. So that got me really fired up. And the thing I will reference is I mentioned about mental toughness in the mental game. So I felt like that was my biggest asset. So what I didn't tell you was in high school, I had honors physics as my last class, my 7th period. And what I would do is, as soon as the bell rang, I would visualize what strategy I was going to use to win my tennis match that day. So walking up to the tennis courts, I wouldn't be thinking about anything else but what my strategy was. If it was windy, I was going to figure out that I was going to come to the net. If it was sunny, I was going to figure out where the sun was. So I had all of this going on. So in college, it was very similar. I did a lot of visualization, and I really thought a lot about the team and how I was going to play. So fast forward, I went to UConn for the next 2.5 years. I had to go an extra half year because I changed majors. I proudly played on the team for that last 2.5 years. My senior year, I had the best record on the team. I had a 10-match win streak. There was a story in the paper. For me, it was surreal because I felt like I was so late in the game and I never took lessons. But I had a lot of heart. I competed fairly, and I was really intense. And at stores, they had this thing, a saying at campus. They said, when Angelo wins a really big point, everyone on campus is going to know. Because he goes, come on, when he wins this huge point. So that's the way I was. I was like coined as this really nice guy, but this really ruthless, fair competitor. So my first job after college was an internship at Jewel Productions, which is the Volvo International Tennis Tournament, which is our sport's biggest tournament in New England. I first did an internship my senior year. I didn't get paid, and I worked really hard. My brother also worked really hard. We both happened to get internships there. And a lot of the people that were working there said, pulled us aside and said, guys, you're working too hard. You're making us paid people look bad. And I didn't care. I definitely wanted a job at this tennis tournament. And so sure enough, I sent a thank you note in December to my boss saying thanks so much for the internship opportunity. And he called me and said, why don't you come in and meet with me? And he offered me a job on the spot. And I had just graduated. So I still had a half year of eligibility for tennis. So believe me, it was so tempting to somehow find out an excuse to stay at UConn 1.5 year more and then go out into the real world. But the real world came knocking and I was offered this job. So I took it. And working there and then teaching tennis on the side, I met Scott Wilson. Now, Scott Wilson was an intense teaching pro. He would make a lot of people cry, guys or girls, after the lesson. He was so intense. He was so passionate about having each player that he worked with get better that sometimes he was over the top. So I was the good cop, he was the bad cop, And he was really my tennis teaching mentor. He mentored me on how to teach tennis. So a few years later, he started to feel numbness in his toes, and he was a fly fisherman, and they thought he had Lyme disease. But he didn't have Lyme disease. He ended up getting ALS. And at 42 years old, he died the next year. And that was really tough on me. And the reason why it was tough was that my good friend Mike, our mutual friend, said, Scott's not going to make it much longer. Can you come to his house next Monday night? We're having a poker game. He loved playing poker. He liked that when he started to become paralyzed. And those of you that know about ALS, you know that it starts from your toes and goes to your brain, and once it gets to your brain, you no longer exist. So you get paralyzed from the bottom up. And so poker was a good sport for him because he could no longer teach or play tennis, but he could play poker. And unfortunately, I turned down my friend Mike. I said, I have to be in New Hampshire with this Mount Washington pro-am I already committed to, like teaching lessons and stuff like that, but I'll be there next Monday. And I distinctly remember on my drive back on Friday afternoon, I was listening to my voicemails, and one was from my friend Mike, and he said, unfortunately, Scott didn't make it. So I had this weight, this regret that I wasn't there for my friend. So my brother called me up, and at the same time, and we're identical twins, he was getting his car washed, and he picked up one of these, a Guinness World Record book, and he was flipping through, and he noticed they had a cool section about the sport of tennis. And he said, Ange, I have a great idea to honor Scott's legacy. And at the same time, call it twin possible or whatever, we both said, set a world record for tennis. And so that's what we did. This was in the year 2006. So we had said, Scott had passed away in 2005. In 2006, we came up with this great idea. Let's break a world record, raise money for ALS Association, and also honor his legacy at the same time. So let's use our skill for something good. So we were flipping through the book. We're flipping through and we're saying, which one's the easiest to break? And we saw, okay, hold 20 balls in one hand for a minute. Well, that's seems impossible. And serve 10,000 times without, hitting a double fault. That seems really tough. So basically, you know what? They're all world records. They're all almost impossible. So we said, let's select one that is the most real. So we found the longest tennis rally. We said, oh, okay, that sounds cool. So I'm going to play you a 9-minute movie. We produced it. We got all the right permissions and everything. And I'll tell you a little about the story, and then I'll conclude it. This was the clapping of the people that stayed until after midnight to support us. This was the actual clapping when we were done.
You seem like you're nice guys, and I tell you what, you're the kind of guys going for something, and the kind of guys I would root for.
The world tennis record is smashed. Twins in Shelton, Connecticut, volley 14 hours and 31 minutes, breaking the Guinness World Record, raising money for 4 different charities.
It's not sheer determination. They say twin power will get them through.
We would have to really be a team that we, inseparable bond.
And despite 25,944 serves of cramped muscles, dehydration, and fatigue, the real goal was always in these hometown heroes' minds.
Our barriers that we overcame in 14 hours and 31 minutes pale in comparison to the barriers that these diseases face.
City Brothers hope to finish sometime after midnight. The challenge is also a fundraiser, and all the money that they raise will go to 4 different charities.
We wanted to combine philanthropy with sport tennis and giving back to the community.
Thank you. This is the certificate. There's also another one at the International Tennis Hall of Fame in Newport, Rhode Island. So if you ever go to Newport and want to learn a lot about tennis, there's a display of the ball that you saw there with no fuzz, our glued counters, and the certificate. But the story is not over. And a couple years ago, it was my birthday in January, and what happened was my wife was on my Facebook page, and there was a lot of people saying happy birthday, and there was a gentleman, he was a mental toughness coach, he's pretty well renowned out of New York, and he wrote, happy birthday to Guinness World Record holder, for longest tennis rally. And someone from Germany posted one word. He put former. So my wife showed me that and said, you better check this out. So we go to the German newspaper websites, and sure enough, a father and a son broke our rally record. Not only did they break the record, they smashed it. We had 25,944 strokes. Now, although it took us 14 hours and 31 minutes to accomplish that feat, Guinness World Record technically goes by the number of shots. So they figured out if we get really close to the net, inches apart, without crossing the net, then we can bang out a lot very quickly. So they did 50,970 strokes in about 10 hours. So about 2/3 the time it took us to do ours. So I called my brother, I said, let's do it again. So for those of you that have been paying attention to the local newspapers, August 8th, a couple months ago at Weston Racquet Club, we set out to try to reset the world record for the longest tennis rally. But one of the huge motivators was we wanted to raise more money for charity. And knowing you guys and knowing Weston, you do a phenomenal job. Because I went to your rally, the rally event that you do, forgetting the name.
Relay for Life.
Relay for Life. In my opinion, you're probably the most dedicated fundraisers in the country. I've never seen anything like it. And for us, it took us 4 years of running events every year to raise $25,944 for the 4 charities. And so I contacted a promotions company called Odds On Promotions out of Las Vegas. And they're the guys that give you $1 million if you hit a hole-in-one in golf. And they never insured a tennis event. They didn't know anything about tennis. So I was here to educate them. So I called them and I said, what if you were to give our charity $1 million if we were to set the world record? And we had previously contacted this company the year after we set the world record. In 2009, we were still fundraising each year for Scott, ALS, Save the Children, and also for Tim and Tom Gullickson. Tim passed away of brain cancer, and he was a tennis coach for Pete Sampras. He was a very famous tennis coach, and they were identical twins as well. So we had a lot to still accomplish. And so we had secured $1 million for anyone that could break our record the year after on a certain given day. And it was this contest. And a lot of people close to me said, why are you putting up $1 million for someone to break your own record? It doesn't seem to make sense. I said, it's not about me. It's about what the record signifies and about raising money and awareness for charities. So they rallied for 5 hours and 20 minutes and unfortunately had a miss. They rallied for about 5,400 shots, and so they didn't win the $1 million. This was a couple years ago. So when we found out our record had been broken, I contacted the same company. I said, my brother and I are going to go out and do it. We want 100% of the money to go to Save the Children. My brother works there full time. And Save the Children works in the U.S. as well as around the world, and most people don't know that. So we would be helping a lot of children in the United States. So they said, well, you guys already are Guinness World Record holders, so we're going to have to make it really tough. You have to rally for more than 50,970 shots, so that would be the longest tennis rally. But you have to average 5,000 strokes per hour or more, so you have to beat their pace. And guess what? You have one attempt to do it on that day. So if you miss your serve, you're out of luck. So here is August 8th. We had trained the entire year and a half since the moment we committed to go after the record again. And the last 3 months, the training was really rigorous. I knew I was a little overweight, so I lost 20 pounds in about a month and a half. And I was eating right, and we would practice every Friday night at Weston Racquet Club. Our club was generous enough to have us stay as long as we wanted on Friday nights and close the club. So what I would do is I wouldn't eat on Friday morning. I would work all day and I wouldn't drink at all. And then at about 6:30 at night, after we closed the club, we would rally basically all night to practice, and then I would drive home in the wee hours of the morning. And I did that every Friday night for about 2 months prior to August 8th. And one of the practices, we had rallied till almost 2 a.m. We went to a diner. We mapped out what we learned. And I was driving home. I didn't have any coffee. I was on 95, and needless to say, I wasn't driving very straight. I was really sleepy. So a policeman pulls me over at 3 a.m. And I had all kinds of equipment and video cameras and tennis rackets and bags. And he said, "Where are you coming from?" I was like, "Western Racket Club." He's like, "What were you doing?" "You're not really going to believe me." He's like, no, what were you doing?" "Well, trying to reset the Guinness World Record for the longest tennis rally." He's like, "Okay, I haven't heard a lot of stories like that, but do you know why I pulled you over?" I was like, "Well, I'm not exactly sure. I don't think I was driving that straight." He's like, "Come out of your car." And so I get out of the car, and the little light above my license plate had burnt out. And so you're supposed to have a light above your license plate that works to illuminate it. And, I didn't know that. So I got a ticket for that, $118. But so the moral of the story is make sure that your license plate light works. But I was happy. I actually thanked him wholeheartedly because I don't know if I would have made it home. I was so sleepy. So I actually thanked him because now I was definitely wide awake. So August 8th comes. I get a call at 8 o'clock the night before, and unfortunately, a friend of mine had passed away, and the funeral was the next day. But we couldn't cancel because it takes about a year to get this all together, and you get permission from Guinness World Records to do the rally on a certain given day. So unfortunately, my family had to go to the funeral, and I didn't have their moral support during the event. With that said, I didn't let that stop me. And so we started the rally an hour late because the live stream wasn't quite working, and we wanted to live stream it. And someone said to me, "You know what, just focus on the rally, do the rally, forget the live stream." But I said, that's not the point. The point isn't about us. The point isn't about breaking the record. The point is about what the record signifies. The more people that we can influence and touch through live stream will then be aware of the charities and maybe donate. So I was pretty stubborn. So we got it working right before 9 o'clock. I go back to the baseline. I do my serve. This was the actual racket that I used. This was the racket that I used in 2008. You could pass that around to set the world record. This was the racket I used this time. It's lighter than that one because we knew we would be doing volley to volley because we had to maintain 5,000 per hour pace, whereas we averaged about 1,700 strokes per hour baseline to baseline in 2008. So we had to do a faster pace. If you notice, I put grip up here because I had to hold the racket up here. What I figured out in doing our practices, if you hold it here, you're actually equally balancing the racket. So it's actually a lot less heavy. But when you hold it down here, you're actually putting all of your strain on your wrist and forearm. So I would hold the racket up here. This little device is a vibration device, and it basically wirelessly records how many shots you're hitting. Every time the ball hits the racket, it would record that. So we had about 4 different recording devices to record it. So we started about 9 a.m. You have to have 2 volunteers clicking, 1 my shots and 1 his shots. And so we rallied for, you can pass that around, we rallied for 5 hours and 28 minutes, 30,576 shots. And let's just say, as the late Yogi Berra once said, half the responsibility for the miss was 90% my brother's. I hit a shot that was a little softer than he anticipated, And rather than reach forward and take it out of the air, he decided to let it bounce and move back. But the problem is, if you do something like this for 30,000 times, and then you let it bounce and you try to do something different, even though your brain tells your body to do it, your body doesn't know any better, and he just did the same exact volley into the net off the bounce. So unfortunately, we failed to reset the record for the longest tennis rally. More importantly, we failed to secure $1 million for Save the Children. However, we did raise $104,333, I will say. But lo and behold, we had practiced volley to volley because that was the quickest way to get to the record, and plus, Odds On Promotions mandated that we had to have a 5,000 stroke average or greater. We were averaging 5,400 strokes, so we were well on our way. We would have set the record in 9.5 hours. Our goal was to set it in under 10 hours. But then Guinness World Records looked at the Germans' videotape, and what they did was they served like we did, and they came to the net, volleyed really fast, then moved back to the service line and took breaks, and then went up and volleyed really fast, and then moved back to the service line and took breaks. So they said, you know what? You guys did the serve, my brother returned the shot, I came in to volley, and then we never let the ball hit the ground for 30,576 shots. So that is this, the Guinness World Record for the longest tennis volley rally. So we set a new world record. Come on, right? Come on. So with that said, I just want to close with a few things. One is I had the privilege and honor to meet Carly Lloyd and talk with her last week. Does anyone know who Carly Lloyd is?
Yes, I know who Carly Lloyd is.
Yes? Okay. So right now, Carly Lloyd is considered the best soccer player in the world. And I never knew that she has a coach. She has a coach. His name is James Galanis. And so James and her and Heather Mitz, who used to be on the U.S. national team and also won 3 Olympic gold medals, were speakers at a mental toughness event. So me really wanting to learn more and more about mental toughness, I went to this event in New Jersey 2 weeks ago. And I have a handout which I got from the event, but I want to give to all of you to help you with your mental toughness and with you guiding your teams. But I want to say that there are 5 pillars that are important for you as captains and also for your athletes. And the first one is technical skill, basically the fundamentals of your sport. And some people are born with good hand-eye coordination, but I think a lot of it is learned. And if you put your mind and your heart to it, then you can accomplish it. So the first one is technical skill. The second is tactical awareness. Basically, strategy and tactics. Each of your sports has their own tactics and their own strategies. And number 3 is physical power. So being in shape, being on a good diet, that's going to help in your sport. The 4th is mental toughness. For me, I believe that's the most important. And it's basically mind over matter. And then the 5th is character. And in 2005, I won the USTA Sportsmanship Award. Mark had said that in my bio. That was a word I was most proud of because it was 3,000 male adults ruthlessly fighting to get #1 ranked in New England. And of all of them, they voted that I was the best sport. So I think that's, really for me, a big accomplishment. But character for you and your players is being coachable. So what I will say from experience on being on teams, and I will say that all of you are better than me. And how you're better than me was, I've never been a sports captain. I would have loved to have been a sports captain and a sports leader. But because I picked up the sport so late, and both times in high school and college, joined the team as a walk-on my junior year, I never had that chance. So now I'm going to live vicariously through you. So I'm going to give you a piece of advice, and that is this. Everyone on your team, treat everyone the same and some of them differently. Because there's a rule called the 10-80-10 rule. 10% of your players will not do what you say, no matter what you say. And the other 10% of the players will do whatever you say, whenever you say it. And the 80% are on the fence deciding which way to go. And as sports captains, it's your job to win over that 80% and the other 10%. And the way to do that is the 10% that give you trouble, deal with them differently on a one-on-one basis, and you could then win them over as well. So with that said, thank you so much, and I definitely want to answer any questions that you have. Any questions about anything that we covered or anything I didn't cover?
Andy, didn't you have a question? Didn't you want to ask a question at the end?
I didn't think I had a question. What was the hardest part about the rally? You and your brother talked to each other with the silence, you had music playing. How did you feed yourself?
Yeah, a lot of people ask that question, was it silence? Was there not? So we had a combination of both. We had created a loop of all of our favorite songs. We had a 1-hour loop. We actually timed the duration of each of the songs to add up to exactly an hour so that we wouldn't have to turn to look at the clock because that might cause an error. And so we timed the songs, and some of them were pump-up songs like Rocky, and then others were more slower songs to really make you concentrate better. And then other times we didn't want music, we wanted silence. In 2008, there were definitely points during the 14 hours and 31 minutes that we wanted silence. But for August 8th, this past August, the 5 hours and 28 minutes, we didn't have time for silence. We were on pace, so we had to really keep up the fast pace. What's that?
Do you listen to any of the songs anymore, or are they like haunting memories?
The ones in 2008, I kind of almost sick of, but the ones here, it was only 5.5 hours, so I still like the songs. We did have camelbacks, and one of the learnings that we had in one of our practices a week prior to the event is try not to hit a tennis ball and urinate at the same time. It doesn't work. So how I can equate it to is this, some things you just never know unless you actually try. We actually had planned for that, and so, depends. I realize why my grandparents, were always in bad moods. Depends are really uncomfortable. So I wore them over my underwear. But anyway, so what happened was I had to use the restroom and, in one of our practices. And so I said to my brother, you know what, this is a great opportunity to learn what it's like, because this might actually happen. And so the thing is I timed the pee with the hit, and you can't do that because just like vomiting, your body freezes, right? Your muscles freeze and you can't do anything else for a split second. Not that any of you ever know anything about that, but so what I realized next year, if we do it, is that I'm gonna time it differently on his hit, not mine. Any other questions? So the water. So we had Camelbacks. They have ones that bikers use that you put fluids in that you wear around your waist. And we also have a vest that you put the liquid in. And so what we did was we put basically something like Gatorade so that it has some neutralites. It wasn't too cold because you don't want to intake liquid that's too cold when you're doing athletics. It's too much of a shock to the system. And so in 2008, when we set the world record, we had Camelbacks, which amounted to 3 small Powerades, the kid-sized Powerades, which is not much. Fortunately for me, I didn't realize how to use the release tab. Basically, you have to bite down on the straw and then intake the fluid. And I wasn't biting down, I was just sucking really hard, and so only a little bit of the liquid went into my mouth. And so I fooled my brain into thinking I was hydrated. But actually, after 15 hours of rallying, I hadn't even finished 1.5 bottles of a kid's Gatorade. That was in 2008. This year, we planned differently. We had vests on. It carried much more fluid. And the thing there was, in practicing, it hurt our shoulders too much. And actually, you have a vein that's under your arm here that controls circulation to your wrist. And when you fill the Camelback up all the way and you rally, if you do something for an hour, it's fine. But if you plan on doing something for 10 hours, it starts to cut off your circulation. So, and then your fingers get numb. So I filled it only halfway. But unfortunately, when we were rallying, it was more taxing than I thought it would be from a concentration standpoint. My family wasn't there supporting me. They were at the funeral. And so, I was definitely at a moment of weakness. And so I wanted to go to a two-handed volley, which we had practiced. So we had practiced, remember what I said about my hand here to balance the weight of the racket. So my other hand here, I could feel like I do this all day long, but some reason the day of the rally, maybe because of my energy or whatever, I was a little too upright, so I was hitting the volley. When I attempted to go two hands, I was hitting it too straight, and it was too risky. So I kept taking the hand off and telling my brother, I can't do the two-handed volley. I'm not hitting it to you well enough. And the irony about this record is it's not just about you, it's about we, it's about team. Not only can't I miss and can't let it get by me, I have to hit a good shot for him to then hit another good shot back. So I decided to stick with one hand and not drink any more fluids. I didn't want to drink anymore. Unfortunately, or fortunately, that EMS was there because they said that I looked a little wobbly going into the 5th hour. I didn't really realize it, but I was dehydrated. And so after about 45 minutes after the rally, I had done a interview with Hartford Current, and I didn't think to hydrate right after. So I was signing some kids' autographs, and I felt very lightheaded. So I excused myself and went into the men's room, and they took me to the hospital. Luckily, it was just 2 IVs. And it was the best tasting cheeseburger I had at the hospital because I hadn't really eaten real food for 2 months prior because I was training. But that's what we did as far as our fluid intake for both record attempts. Yeah.
When's your next attempt going to be?
So that's a dangerous question. Right now we're still kind of licking our wounds. Although we are getting a little bit of the spunk and spirit back. I will say that although it's a nice consolation prize to earn another world record, that was never the goal. And so to not raise the $1 million for charity definitely was a stinger. I need to kind of build back my family balance. I have 2 young children at home and a wife. My son Andy is 4 and my daughter Madison is 9. And I definitely burnt the candle on both ends, and a lot of you can attest with getting ready for college exams and or college entry applications and your schoolwork and your family. That when you really put your heart and soul into something, and then whether it happens or not, you kind of gotta build back that life balance. So I'm building back my balance, and I think if everything was on balance, and if we were able to get $1 million again, then I think it would be something nice to try again. Although, I don't know. We haven't decided yet. Any other questions? For those of you that are not tennis players, do you find this inspirational if you're not tennis players? In what way? Like, in what way?
What way? I would say definitely that after you poured so much time and effort into achieving that goal the first go around, only to find out that shortly after somebody else broke your record, that you went back, you trained hard, and attempted it again. Yeah.
And I will say, the record held for 5 years. It felt like a long time. You can pass these books around. They're in different languages. I marked the page that we're on with a paper. It's page 257. Not that I'm keeping track, but there was if you read Chinese, if anyone reads Chinese, there's a couple of different languages. Maybe you could tell me exactly what languages some of those are. I will say that nobody really knows this, but 2 weeks before August 8th, we couldn't accomplish a 3-hour rally on a Friday night one night. We had done 1-hour practice rallies, practicing for a 10-hour rally. We knew we needed 10 hours to secure the $1 million. And unfortunately, my brother started to get severe wrist pain whenever we would rally beyond an hour. And one time we went for 3 hours and he basically could not continue. So he got an MRI and the results came back and he had a small tear in his tendon in his wrist. And this was 2 weeks before August 8th. So rather than canceling the whole attempt, we just didn't tell anybody. And I have two sports psychologists I work with. One is Dr. Larry Lauer. He is the mental toughness coach for all U.S. tennis players, male and female, that are on the tour. And I called him and I pleaded with him. I said, we're practicing and my brother can't finish more than 3 hours. He has pain in his wrist. Do you really believe in mind over matter? Is there such a thing as mind over matter? And he said, yes, there is. If you really believe in what you're doing and you believe in your goal, then there is such a thing as mind over matter. Now, I will say, consult your coaches and trainers before you do anything that would ever injure you. But for me, I told my brother, there's no way I'm going to miss, and there's no way I'm going to let the ball pass. I just don't care. And it's the same with him. He had the same dedication. So I thank you for that. It is really tough to go out and do something like that when you know that you're sacrificing a lot. But at the end of the day, I know in life, a lot of people have accomplished and sacrificed a lot more than I have for a greater goal. So for me, it's worth it. Anyone else want to share how it may inspire you that's a non-tennis player, and how you can maybe inspire your teammates? Yeah.
I liked how when you did your first tournament, how like you said the other guy was obviously better than you, but you worked a lot harder and that's how you won. So I think that can be useful in a lot of different things, that a lot of times it's just about how hard you work and how much you want it.
Yeah. And in talking with Carly Lloyd, she said, it's not what if, I'm going to paraphrase, but it's not what if, it's what is. Champion athletes don't think about what if they don't accomplish their goal. They live their life as footsteps to accomplishing their goal, and that's all they know. So I remember when I was watching the U.S. World Cup, and I remember she saying that she didn't invite her family or friends to the World Cup. they called her up and said, do you have good tickets? Yeah, I can get you good tickets, but I'm not going to have you come. I need to be 100% focused on the task at hand, winning the World Cup, and guess what? When I come home, we'll celebrate. And I was wondering why, first of all, I admired her for that, but secondly, I was wondering why that was the case. So in finding out 2 weeks ago, was that she, prior to that, at the Olympics or the World Cup prior to that, had invited her entire family, and she played horrible. And so she didn't want to do that again. She didn't want to have all these expectations on her. She wanted to stay focused on her goal. So I thought that that was really admirable. And the second thing is I know that she practices every day of the year, including on Christmas. And one person asked her, why do you practice with your coach on Christmas? She said, because no one else is. So therefore, I'm going to be that much better. So I do really believe that hard work beats out talent when talent doesn't work hard. Can't remember who quoted that, but I do believe in that quote. And that's what I'm about. I hope you can relate to my story because I come from a humble upbringing. My parents didn't have a lot of money. My dad had come over from Italy when he was a teenager to Canada because it was easier to immigrate to Canada. And so I never really had a tennis lesson. I never had a tennis coach. I never was fortunate enough to be a captain of any team. But at least I think I've created a story that I hope inspires all of you.
How about another round of applause for Angela? That's amazing, and what keeps resonating in my mind with a couple of your questions and with Angela's responses, we talk all the time about focusing on the process, and the result will take care of yourself. And Charlie's question just now about not a question, but a statement about what inspired you. We can't control the opponent. You can't control that the opponent might be more talented than you in some areas. But the one thing you can always control, and you hear this from your coaches, and I know you hear it from me probably too frequently, the one thing you can always control is your attitude and what you bring to the table every day. And I think that's part of the message that is being sent here is go with the right attitude, come in with the work ethic, and share that with your teammates. And as leaders, that's your responsibility. The 80-10-10 rule, that isn't just for your athletes, that's for everyone you're going to come in contact with, starting right now for the rest of your life, in your job, in college, on your teams. It's something that we talk about with the coaching staff as well, with their athletes. That there's some athletes on their team that just aren't going to buy in, and some that are going to buy in no matter what you say, and then it's the 80% that you have to try and bring off the fence towards what you're trying to accomplish. But thank you again, Angela. It was so really quickly, I would like to go through the fall teams and get an end of season team report from all of our fall teams. Angelo was impressed before when he just walked down the hallway. Wait till you hear what's going on still. I mean, these athletes amaze me every day. And then we also are going to get a report from our, we had some captains just go to the sportsmanship conference and also get to go up and accept an award on behalf of our school. In fact, why don't we start there? With the sportsmanship conference first. So, is that you, Urs? Are you on for this? I know you were nominated that day. They kind of pushed you and said, oh, Urs is the one who's doing the talking. So 4 captains joined us at the sportsmanship conference. We had a new speaker this year. Aaron was there as well, and Shar, who had to just leave. So why don't you tell them a little bit about the conference, a little bit about what you learned there.
Okay, so we went to sportsmanship conference,
And it was with a bunch of other schools. We were actually sharing a table with Newington High School who brought 4 juniors, so it was fun to kind of talk to them and see how their students went. But the main highlight of the conference was a speaker named Mike Smith, who grew up in a small town in Nebraska and talked about how we can include people and how we can use our positions as leaders to help those who maybe don't have so much of a voice or have a hard time integrating themselves into the social culture or making friends or setting up for themselves. And his
well, he was just kind of an inspiration. He started off as a kid who was kind of like a ghost. He felt he didn't have a voice in his school.